Sustainable Development Goal number 5 and aspiration number 6 in the AU Agenda 2063 echo our principle as articulated in Article 6A, subsection F of the revitalized 1996 agreement establishing IGAD that provides for the recognition, promotion, and protection of human and people's rights in accordance with the provision of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. In this regard, my interpretation of this provision with the context of this meeting is that IGAD is obliged to address gender disparities in all spheres of life. In our role as a regional policy coordination authority, IGAD is serious for all our member states to institute policies that seek to transform the existing distribution of resources and responsibilities in order to establish more equitable relationship between women and men. These policies would aim not only promoting and protecting women's rights as enhanced in international law, but also amplifying the voice and agency of women to influence and participate in decision making. It is a positive development that a number of legislative frameworks have been developed, but we still face gaps in the implementation, meaning that women still face some systemic discrimination, in part due to social and cultural barriers, and inaccessibility of public institutions to support them. Moreover, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, gender concerns are increasingly shrinking in development cooperation as evidenced by the limited funding allocated to gender issues, especially in hard sectors such as peace and security, coupled with the anemic implementation of gender mainstreaming in development policies. Moreover, Your Excellencies, the inadequate of gender disaggregated data both in development cooperation and national statistics has limited our capacity to fully appreciate the latent potential of women's land rights as a driver of regional development and, of course, a very important one, the regional integration. This is an evidence gap that should therefore be urgently corrected. Gender is a basic determination of social relations and rights in state and households. Combined with other social factors such as class, ethnicity, and caste, gender determines to the greatest extent for women in particular their ability to capitalize on opportunities, the limits of their aspirations, the established standard of living, their access to resources, their status in society, and their sense of self-perception, especially in rural communities. Taken all together, Your Excellencies, this factor limits the optimal capacity of women as a productive member of society and their potential as an asset for our member states and societies. For the IGAD region, these limitations represent a significant cost of foregone opportunities in terms of social and economic development. Land rights, whether customary or formal or legal, therefore represent one of the most important avenues to social and economic empowerment the world over. What we do know is that in equitable governance of land-linked resources is one of the principal causes of conflict, human rights violation, and poverty affecting our societies. For one region to attain the peace, prosperity, and integration that we keenly aspire to, we must therefore systematically address the deficiencies of our policies and practices in land governance, including conflicting legislations as well as inefficient administrative procedures. We must also address ourselves to the outcome of the deficiencies in land administration that have resulted in increased insecurity of tenure, environmental degradation, unregulated urbanization, historical land injustice, and most importantly, access to land, especially for women, children, and minority group. Unequal access to land is therefore, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, one of the root cause of the feminization of poverty in our region. Honorable Ministers, in order for us to reverse this state of affairs, we are duty-bound to entrench land reform and gender policy frameworks that promote the principles of gender equality in land reform. This includes mechanisms for ensuring women's full and equal participation in decision-making in national and regular land reform agenda. Over the past 2 years, the IGAD Secretariat has worked with the technical staff in our IGAD member states to understand, analyze, synthesize, and strategize on how best the region can move a regional transformative agenda on equality on land. Today we deliver the Regional Women's Land Right Agenda to you, Honorable Ministers, for action. I'm very happy most of the ministers are also women. This agenda is a call to action for the transformation of our region. It is anchored in the National Women's Land Right Agenda of your respective countries. I therefore call upon you to support its implementation through national budget and resource allocation. This agenda is premised on our collective understanding that for our region to develop, we must harvest the benefit offered to us by women in terms of enhanced agricultural productivity, improved family health and well-being, reduced conflict, better governance, as well as deeper regional integration through harmonized land governance frameworks. Honorable Ministers, dear participants, I will conclude my remarks by reiterating that IGAD remains committed to supporting gender equality throughout the region. On my part, I will continue to deliver on my solemn duty to bring IGAD closer together and deliver IGAD to the people and to make IGAD very near to our 250 million citizens of the region, both men and women of this region. Thank you very much. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, Executive Secretary, for your very encouraging welcome remarks. It's now my pleasure and privilege to welcome the Honorable Farida Karonei, Cabinet Secretary for Lands and Fiscal Planning of the Republic of Kenya, to make her welcoming statement. Karibu Waziri.
Good morning. You know, these days it's funny because the first thing you do is sanitize. even before you greet people. But welcome to Kenya and welcome to Nairobi. Your Excellency, the Executive Secretary of IGAD, Dr. Wokne Gabeyehu, our current Chair, Minister Ahmed Adam, Honorable Ministers, colleagues from Uganda, from Ethiopia, Djibouti, Somalia, Kenya, and directors from all our member countries, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Good morning. Is it too cold? It's very cold today. Last week it was 13 degrees. So we should cheer up because the subject we are speaking about is a warm subject. We are speaking about bringing women at the center of issues land and resources. Be happy because from 50% of the population. And if you look at the high table, I'm very happy to see that the Executive Secretary, the Chair, from Somalia are in the minority. Because women are always in the minority. So we should be speaking about really bringing women and administration and management, talking about resolving conflict, because in our continent, a lot of the conflicts we experience are centered around land as a resource. So I think it's an important subject to discuss this morning, and we should make commitment to move from this many policy programs that in our countries we run, because it has always been. It is not the absence of policy that is marginalizing women. It is the absence of implementation. In our countries, so in Nairobi, and our national park. This is the only in a city anywhere in the world. So quickly, the Nairobi National Park. And as you experience, it will give you the to think about how you are going to include in your countries, in your directorates, in the management of this critical resource. So I want to thank all of you for making time here this morning so that we can endorse what I believe is a document in furthering the rights of women, which, as we correctly say, protecting human rights. In the rest of our continent, land is very, very emotive. And I think what I'm going to speak about will largely mirror what is happening in our countries across the continent. Because what I mention is not unique to Kenya, it's unique to our continent. So as I speak, I think many of you will begin to feel or wonder whether I'm speaking about their countries, but that is because we are very similar in the way we have managed land from pre-independence, currently post-independence, and going forward for future generations. So in our country, Kenya, laws on land have undergone some evolution of sorts from the colonial period, post-colonial period, to moving forward to the technology age, and we are beginning to wonder what is really wrong with management of land in our country. Is it that we don't have sufficient law? Is it we don't have sufficient policy? Sufficient commitment for implementation? I think it is the latter that is the problem, because as you will see, promulgation of our Constitution of 2010, which really brings women to the center of all our affairs as a country, we are beginning to ask, what can we do? What more can we do to begin to live these policies that we are writing? Because our constitution is one of the most progressive constitutions in the world, not just in our continent. We have a land policy we are currently reviewing of 2009. It's very progressive. Yet, the percentage of women that own land in Kenya is probably about 2%. And I'm saying probably because one of the other issues we face is lack of clear statistics on what is really happening in land in Kenya. And that is why as a country we are currently trying to digitalize our transactions so that it will be easier to access data. So we really need to reflect as we look at this document today that you're going to present. The nice things I saw you have written in this communique that we are going to sign. how will they be carried forward? How will they be implemented? That is really the question, because it's not for lack of policy that we are struggling as a continent. And it's not for lack of policy that we are here. So we must begin to ask the deeper questions. For us as a country, marginalization of some of our communities and disparity in terms of access to resources, not just land, is at the center of the current land reform program that we are undertaking as a country. And at the center of that land reform program is really digitalization and implementation of an act we are calling the Community Land Act of 2016. In our country, 70% of the land is held by communities. Unfortunately, we only started documenting the rights of those communities in the year 2019. That's slightly more than a year ago. 70% community land. Documentation, I think so far we've only registered about 5 community lands. And they occupy 70% of the land mass of Kenya. So as I said, it's not so much that we lack law. We have a law to document those rights. We have only just started the process of implementation. And we have found it very complex, because it's not as easy as it's written on paper. Because when you go to the communities, the actual dynamics begin to play out. The men in our communities begin to want to claim more space than they should. Yet in that law, we have said we document the rights of every adult member of a community. And we include women in the community land management committees. But they still have to fight for that space, even though we have written it in our law. So what is really our problem as a continent? I think we need to begin to examine our cultures. We need to begin to examine our mindsets. When we had the virtual conference in June, I don't remember, I think it was a lady from Sudan, I think, or South Sudan, who asked the question, if we in our continent consider women to be property, how then do we expect property to own property? Those are not my words. It's a lady who was speaking during the conference we had in June. So we still treat in 2021, the year of our Lord, our women as property. And then we ask the question, how can property own property? Then you begin to understand why the rate of ownership of land in Kenya is only 2% for women. And our country has more than 500,000 square kilometers of land, but is owned by women. So it's not these laws we are writing, it's not our constitution. As I said, it's one of the most progressive. We need to begin to examine our mindsets, our culture. There are many elements of our culture that are good and should be kept. But there are also many elements of our culture that we need to begin to question place in the 21st century. Will we begin to secure the rights of women and protect them, as our constitutions indeed say we should protect them? When we have conflict, the people that suffer most are usually women and children. So shouldn't they be the ones to control the resources? Because when you control resources, you will control how wars are fought. We need to start to begin to put money, resources, land in the hands of our women, because these are really the people who will determine how Africa, our continent, progresses into the 21st century in a world where data and information drives global economies. So we need to begin to question our policies. We need to begin to question implementation of those policies and see to it that every decision we take, we have women sitting around the table. And as I said, I'm very pleased with today's high table, because it represents what should actually be happening in our communities. In our country, we even have a special court to hear land and environment matters. The Land and Environment Court, written into our constitution in 2010, and that was because of the recognition of the fact that there were very many disputes around land, and it was taking way too long in the judicial system to conclude them. So our constitution in 2010 set aside a court to try, hear, and dispense justice in those matters. We also, through that constitution, introduced a special constitutional commission to land injustices, National Land Commission, whose job it is to listen to these injustices and provide cause for the communities that feel that their land had been unjustly taken away from them, both during the colonial time and immediately we got independence, what happened thereafter. So this commission works very closely with the Ministry of Lands in trying to resolve these disputes. So that is really a recognition of the policy gaps that existed in terms of policy. I will continue to insist, it's not because we lack policy, sometimes I think it's because we lack the will to implement the policy. Maybe sometimes we actually are not sure how to go about it because of the dynamics of culture in our communities. When you go to some communities, as we did last year when we were doing sensitization on the Community Land Act of 2016, we go to some communities and there are places where women sit very far at the back and then the men come to sit in the front. You're talking to them about implementing them equally. Yet they come there and they carry their they say in our community, so men sit at the back. These are the cultures we question. Why is it on the front row? Is it they are not properly dressed, in which case we should ask them to dress properly? Lack of voice to speak, or what is really the problem? So to interrogate, and as we do advocacy in our communities, and that because says they to either sign away or protect these community lands? Those are the questions we should be asking as we sit here this morning to endorse the report that you're going to put before us. We have many laws in our country, including the Matrimonial Property Act, which says that spouses should have equal access to matrimonial property. But it's not always the case. They always end up in court, challenging each other, whether who and which property while we were married. So it's not really the absence of law that is the problem in our continent. And as I said, I'm giving these examples in our country because I know they reflect the same reality in our countries across the globe. Food security is a critical component of development. Half of the world's farmers are women, but they don't have land. They don't even have rights to use the land as a resource. So how is it 50% of them are farmers, but they don't own the critical resource? Somebody else owns it. We should be asking, why is this? Why can we not change this? If 50% of our farmers are women, how come 50% of the land is not owned by women? Those are the questions we should be asking. So we should partner as we come to the conclusion of this conference, partner with each other, advocacy, we push very hard the agenda for women, sensitize our own women, our policymakers, our leaders, so that we speak the same language. It is in this context that I think we are here this morning. We've made progress in many areas, but we continue to experience the gaps that I have said. So what will move us forward, in my opinion, is really to put the policy aside and to ask those tough questions that we should be asking. What is wrong with our culture? What is wrong with our values? How is it that our women are farming on somebody else's land? Why can they not own the land that they are farming on? Because we need them to grow food for our increasing populations. So these are the uncomfortable things we should be asking, ladies and gentlemen, as we come to this conference and take back home the true action points that will make a difference. Taking our kids to school, advocacy, talking more about the uncomfortable things, making sure that our policy frameworks are aligned with the things that we say we want to do, and making sure that we have data to guide our decision making. For those of us who are digitalizing, that is a critical component or output of the digitalization program, because it will make data readily available for decision makers to make decisions on how to include women. So for us as a country, we make our commitment that we will partner with our colleagues in the region when it comes to pushing the agenda of women forward. But effective execution of these action points will not happen unless we are genuinely willing to partner and collaborate. So I call upon all of us to take active roles in your countries, in your communities, to bring women to the center of decision making. I look forward to a very fruitful deliberation this morning, and I'm eager to sign the document because I know it means a lot for our women. I thank you very much for your attention, and once again, welcome to our country.